Here we are on the Sunday, the 13th of September 2009, about 6 o'clock in the evening, and we're located at the west end of Redcross Street, which is close to Bristol's Cabot Circus. The reason why we are here is we're looking at the birthplace site of what was probably one of Britain's greatest portrait painters of the period in the early 19th century, Sir Thomas Lawrence. The facade you see here is all that remains of his birthplace site. It's now used by the City Council as part of their scientific services service. Now, Sir Thomas Lawrence became a portrait painter, but his early days show that he was a child prodigy. His father was a landlord of a pub nearby in the Corn Street area, and by the time Thomas was 9, they had moved to Devizes, where his talents became better known. By the time he was 20, he was already working in London, and he mixed with other artists such as Sir Joshua Reynolds, who was the first president of the Royal Academy, and others like Samuel West, the American painter who replaced Sir Joshua Reynolds as president later on. By the time Thomas Lawrence reached his 30s, he became court painter to George III, and he was later painter to George IV. Now, those two kings were on the throne from 1760 to 1820, and from 1820 to 1830. Now, Sir Thomas Lawrence was born in 1769 in this house, on this site, and we have two plaques. The later of two, which was established by Bristol City Council's famous blue plaque series within the last 10 years, and an earlier one which is located on a modern building nearby, which is about a century in date. Now, another reason why we are here is we wanted to highlight the importance of Sir Thomas Lawrence in portrait painting. There is a collection to him of some of his early works, including a bust done of him by a sculptor, which exists in the City Museum in Bristol. But there's another reason. He was born in 1769, and in 10 years' time we'll be coming up to the 250th anniversary of his birth. Now, 1769 was a famous year for other reasons, because it was also the same year that Wellington was born and Napoleon was born, so it was an exact contemporary. Now, Sir Thomas Lawrence became the third president of the Royal Academy in the early 19th century. I have to check the dates, but his paintings are widely seen throughout Britain and the world, a great number of which are located in the main banqueting hall at Windsor Castle. There are also some of his paintings located at Downing Street in London and elsewhere, but he is quite noticed for his style, and it would be nice to have this area where he was born redesignated, perhaps one day with a statue, perhaps even naming this area as a little square within Redcross Street. Now, if I go down to the other sites nearby, I can show you the other plaque and a tomb that is linked possibly to the Lawrence family. And right here we have an early plaque which commemorates Sir Thomas Lawrence. I've seen photographs of this in the Reese Winston collection of plaques similar to this one. There's one in Redcross, there was one in Redcliffe Hill, which doesn't exist anymore, but the date of the photograph seems to suggest that these plaques are almost 100 years in date. I'll have to check that as well. But we're located on the corner of Redcross Street and Asher Lane. Now, Asher Lane was here at the time that Sir Thomas Lawrence was born, and there is a drawing of the frontage of the house, which we've just looked at, that exists in the catalogue in the Royal Collection. Here we are, located in what is now a little park in Redcross Street, just to the east of the birthplace site of Sir Thomas Lawrence. And we have this monument here which has on it inscriptions carved in the early 19th century to members of the Lawrence family. Now, given its close proximity to Sir Thomas Lawrence's birth site, I'm wondering whether there's a link between these Lawrences and the court painter. Now, it's in a rather sad condition, but the inscriptions exist on 3 of the sides of this early 19th century tomb, because this park now has replaced a former churchyard. We're in Redcross Street. I can read some of the names, and if we use the camera to focus on the inscriptions, the best ones appear on this end. And I think for the record, it would be good to sort of preserve this. I'll just read the first couple of lines. Sacred to the memory of Mrs. Charlotte Lawrence, wife of Mr. Theodore Lawrence, attorney at law, and only daughter of John Wilcox, Esquire, both of this city. She died 21st of May 1808. Now, Sir Thomas Lawrence was born in 1769 and lived until to 1830. So these would have been exact contemporaries. On this side we have, beneath this tomb, sweetly sleeps in Jesus Sarah Ann Lawrence, the infant daughter of Theodore and Charlotte Lawrence of this city. She died the 9th of September 1806, aged 14 days. And then there's a little prayer underneath. And on this end here, we just have one name that survived, the rest of which doesn't appear to have been carved, but there is a name here which says Maria Charlotte Lawrence, and the style of the writing seems to suggest the same date as those mentioned beforehand. Okay.